Hello everyone, welcome to our last edition of Polls 2024 as journalists see it. We have a new government, more of the old in place, but we have a strong opposition and for the first time in 10 years, a leader of the opposition, Rahul Gandhi. To discuss the elections and the challenges ahead, we have two senior journalists with us who have spent decades in covering politics from the field and mostly for the print media. Anand Sahay and Sukumar Muralidharan, both experts, both practitioners of free and independent journalism. One, Sukumar, who's now also teaching and has taught journalism, and Anand Sahay, who was the former president of the Press Club of India. Welcome to both of you, and so glad you've joined us.
Thanks so much for hosting us. Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks. So let me start with you, Anand. What do you think has been the most worthwhile result of these elections? And have they made you feel more optimistic about democracy, Indian democracy?
Yes. I think let me begin with a small deficiency in the analysis and coverage, which I think relied mostly on statistical details. However, I think the real importance of this election can be seen best if we draw on a wider perspective, which is that the social and political changes taking place in the country, accompanied by economic changes in a certain direction that badly impacted the ordinary Indian, no matter which part of the country he was in or she was in. And politically, as we know from the case of Jammu and Kashmir and Manipur, the management from the center was totally autocratic and totally uncaring of these people in our far border areas. So this was a wide perspective. And if this election had gone the other way, as did the previous two had done, then I'm not sure that we would today not be staring as a country towards a far more complex journey since 1947. So that for me was the biggest takeaway. I'm glad the government of the day, led by Shri N.D. Modi, has been trimmed, and its worst results have come from the very states where it had appeared to have struck deep roots, which is Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan, and I would include Maharashtra. The Madhya Pradesh made a big difference. That Madhya Pradesh has now truly emerged as as a place where a certain kind of, if you prefer, a cultural revolution of a certain type. It was certainly the case that the Congress party's mismanagement, the Congress leaders' own propensities have led to the result. But I think my own sense tells me that the phenomenon we find in the last 10 years or a little more needs deeper research of cultural history as well.
Okay. So Sukumar, just to stay on this issue for a little longer, what worked for the BJP? I'm not asking you what did not work. What worked in the sense that it was able to get 240 seats? And what worked for the Congress, if anything? I mean, for the opposition, not the Congress, for India.
Yeah, well, what worked for the BJP is that it held on to its traditional areas of strength in Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, and that central part of India, Jharkhand also, and it broke new ground in Orissa, right? And it won everything in Orissa. So what didn't work, of course, is well known. The Ayodhya whole gambit didn't work. It failed to have very much of failed to sway voter sentiment very much. And again, of course, in Karnataka, they weren't set back as badly as people expected. Early expectations were that they would lose at least the majority of seats. As in 2019, they held virtually everything in Karnataka, and they were expected to lose a majority of those seats, but they didn't. They held on by their nails. So I guess what ultimately did work was it was again a mixed package, because the BJP has become more than ever. It was run as a presidential style campaign involving one person, the single undisputed leader of the BJP, and it was all a question of how the voting public reacted to him, and he was all over the place. His presence was kind of ubiquitous all over, and his every speech of his was carried over social media and propagated to all corners of the country. So I think it had, to some extent, the effect of rallying the troops, and to some extent it had a negative impact in the sense that people have heard this rhetoric for so long without any manner of delivery. So how much longer are they going to put up with this? A lot of sound without any substance. So that again was a mixed picture for the BJP.
So, now that we have the government in place and the new members of parliament have taken oath, Anand, we saw one thing during this election, which I don't remember seeing it for years and for decades before, or ever since I've been covering the elections, is that the Constitution of India became a major issue in these elections on the streets. People were voting for defending or saving the Constitution. And then we saw it being carried by the entire India opposition in parliament, in the Lok Sabha yesterday while they were taking oath. So there is this whole stress on the Constitution. How do you think this is going to play out? And how important do you think this is?
I think this is of critical importance. This is what I was referring to when you asked me the first question. The transformation of India in a certain direction was being attempted with great assiduousness, great care, and propagated by a certain class of people and media owned by that class. So it was trying to attempt to push back a certain direction the country had taken since 47. The whole thing was how to, without technically doing so, without overhauling the Constitution, without throwing it out, in various ways, using subtle, open, and not so visible means to change the direction of the Constitution. And the whole effort was headed by somebody who was a very hard-working politician, who indeed is a very hard-working politician, and for a certain kind of politics, who is even a dangerous politician. So that attempt, if that had to be stymied, then people, ordinary folk living far away from the big cities, and even the folk in the big cities but who are down the urban ladder, they had to be made aware that the Constitution of India, even though it works in fits and starts, even though it's the practical side is very, very ineffective so many times, but it is fundamental to not only restoring your rights as a citizen, unlike a subject in the British regime or the earlier feudal regime, but also your dignity, which go with your rights, of course, naturally, which is the share of the pie, the national economic pie that you will eventually be entitled to get. Right?
Right.
So that issue had to be highlighted. It was highlighted, and thank God, the extraordinary push the ruling establishment gave to the idea of effecting changes of a certain type in the Constitution, as articulated by some of its prominent members of parliament. That clicked with the public when leaders of political parties who stood in opposition to that idea went into the field. It was very important for them to go to the field, to be seen to be working together, at least on this point, even though in different states they may be having varied interests.
Right. So, Sukumar, when the government took over again under Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and you had the same cabinet and everything, and then you had NG prosecuting Arundhati Roy, and you had that incident in Punjab with the FIR out for the CISF woman. And then you had, the usual attacks on the Muslims and the Christians, who are always the poor, cheap fodder for goons. People started saying, writing, and even articles appeared, it's more of the same. Do you think it's more of the same, or do you see significant changes in the scenario today?
Yeah, well, I think the first 2 terms, the BJP was emboldened to pursue this extreme agenda by the absence of a coherent and cohesive opposition. So now it's up to the opposition to raise these issues. Apart from the points that you make, there was also that series of home demolitions in Madhya Pradesh over the discovery of beef, supposed, and finally turned out not to be the case. Supposed discovery of bovine meat in the refrigerators in 14 houses, and all 14 were demolished. Without any kind of due process, summary justice. And we've seen this happening over the last 10 years. Increasingly, it's a kind of, it's become a easy recourse for the BJP to show that they are tough on wrongdoers, and that's a way for them to mobilize their flock. So I think criticism has been muted, if not completely paralyzed, by the fact that they can do what they want. I mean, they enjoy complete impunity. Right? It's up to these to ensure that this manner of wrongdoing does not continue. How well equipped they are for the challenge, of course, is a matter we need to still wait and see, because unfortunately sometimes the opposition is also playing the same game of trying to appease the very same sections that the BJP is trying to mobilize. So this is an opportunity that should not be missed, because this goes fundamentally against the rule of law, and what is the constitution except for kind of a statement that the rule of law is dominant, is something that cannot be violated, right? And apart from that, of course, the constitution was an issue in this election, in the sense that it had multiple meanings to different people. Like, for instance, if you said constitution to a Dalit crowd, it was for them the kind of protections and preferences that they've enjoyed. If you said constitution to a Muslim elector, it was about the kind of amendment to the Citizenship Act, which made religion a factor in citizenship for the first time, right? And so on. And and each of these was aided by the BJP's own actions, right? For instance, the 10% reservation for economically disadvantaged, quote unquote, economically disadvantaged, was effectively a reservation for the upper castes, right? So that kind of creates that sense among the people who've been beneficiaries for reasons of historical disadvantages, beneficiaries of reservations, that the BJP is out to dilute these preferences. Yeah. So those kind of things, the BJP has done enough to merit to deserve public skepticism about their fidelity towards the constitutional principles. And it's very good that they got this manner of a comeuppance, because well, it should have been a lesson to them, but unfortunately, exactly as you said, from the composition of the Union Cabinet and from their decision to field Mr. Om Birla again as Lok Sabha Speaker, the man who ran a kangaroo court that effectively suspended 20% of the membership of the Lok Sabha at one fell swoop. So it shows that for them, they're trying hard to stick to the pretense that nothing has changed, that they'll go on as before. But I think it's up to the opposition to tell them very clearly that that is not the case, that they can't delude themselves in that belief anymore.
So one of the challenges, Anand, lies in exactly what Sukumar has said about the opposition stepping up. And a lot of that will have to do with the Congress. Because in these elections, are we right in thinking, if you take this analysis, that most of the seats came from states for the India bloc, where there are regional parties as well, which either teamed up with the Congress and they fought and gave a good fight together, like in UP, etc. And where the Congress was fighting the BJP directly, like in Uttarakhand and Himachal to some extent, but definitely Madhya Pradesh, there was this, this sort of what looks like void territory. So it'll have to really regain a presence in all these states to become more and more effective as the years go by, right?
That is certainly the case, but in this, if we take this view in a related way, we have to take it into account Rajasthan as well. There was no regional party support in Rajasthan. In Punjab, there was no regional party support, where they regained, their earlier elan to a considerable degree.
Yes.
Right? Haryana, they fought back very well. I think small adjustments here and there may have produced a better result. And in Haryana, two out of 10 are being recounted. The application has been made. That will happen. I don't know what the result is going to be. So I think the Congress cannot be analyzed today in exactly the same way as it was being done before the election. There is a change. I think we need to take that on board. Number two, I think I completely agree with the idea that the Congress has to up its game. It is not enough for X or Y leader of the party, most notably Mr. Rahul Gandhi, to make a speech, to intervene. He's become a very effective person as far as interventions go. But the Congress party has to hit the deck running on the ground. Rahul's yatras were very, very significant. They did help to turn the national mood. And yet, I think this is something, it is a continuing process. It is not like, something has come to a close, let's begin a new chapter with the election having taken place. So I think it has to be a little bit more than that. Opposition in parliament is wonderful. It is necessary to coordinate better. It's also important that the same parties that are coordinating in parliament, who went together more or less in the election, should continue their effectiveness on the ground, go back to people and campaign on those very points. The turnaround is in the process of taking place. These are processes that take time to fully materialize. Not instant coffee, right?
Of course.
Yeah. So that has to be kept in view. And I also think, if I may add this, though it's not directly part of your question, but I think it's important to consider that the BJP itself has been treated by and large as a monolith in every discussion. I think that is not entirely the case. They can be a monolith, as most parties can be when they are driving in the driver's seat. But today especially, I do believe there is dissonance inside the BJP. Its lack of cohesiveness needs certain, there are crevices which need, to be thought about. And the fundamental thing here is to which enough attention has not been drawn. I think in a section of BJP, those who are the original BJP, let's say, that they have taken a hammering this time. And as the results are showing, that out of 170 or 171 BJP MPs of the last Lok Sabha who were repeated, 111 lost the election.
Yes.
That is leading to a lot of introspection.
Yeah.
Number two, the BJP itself did not field 130 odd of its MPs. That is creating some issue. And number three, after the parliament voting ended, the Lok Sabha voting ended, the BJP parliamentary party, its newly elected MPs, are yet to elect their new leader. Had such a meeting been held, would they have elected the same man who took them to defeat? From a commanding position in Lok Sabha, the man took them to defeat. So would they have gone for the same person, or even if they had, would they have raised certain objections and criticisms in their internal party meeting? and then maybe agree to endorse him on certain terms. So we do not know that, and these things have not happened.
Right.
This is unprecedented in our party, in our country's history, including in the BJP.
Right.
Including the BJP.
Right.
You see, it is understandable. I think it is the case that when the BJP is in power, and especially when the BJP is in power with an absolute majority,
Yeah.
the Prime Minister, the BJP Prime Minister, has way more power in the system than the RSS head or the RSS as an organization. In fact, he has the means to completely subvert the RSS as an organization by throwing money at them, which they have done.
Yes.
And yet, when the BJP is not in power, then we know who is in control. And right now, the BJP has got to power because the Rashtrapati Bhavan has played ducks and drakes with convention and practices, has permitted the swearing in as prime minister of a man who is yet to be elected the leader of his own parliamentary party.
Exactly.
In that event, the RSS has leverage, and that's one of the reasons, only one, why I say that the current BJP bloc in parliament lacks cohesiveness. How
True.
that will play out, we'll have to see. It depends on how the opposition MPs behave.
Yes.
Also,
Yes. In fact, I think the coming days are going to be very exciting, weeks and months, and maybe the first 2 years, definitely so. So, Sukumar, this election we thought would be polarized, but because of this upsurge of the backwards, the Dalits, the minorities, and the poorest of the poor, I mean, I agree with Rahul Gandhi when he said it was the poor that voted for the opposition in. It seemed that the polarization had cracked to a great extent. And in this kind of a scenario, it is interesting to note that the left is not there at all. Because why I'm reminded of that is in previous coalitions, you had the left playing a very stabilizing role in bringing in all sections, even if there was some level of caste polarization. But now the left is gone and it's been replaced almost entirely by a more progressive, or at least seemingly more progressive Congress. How is this going to work out and pan out now?
Yeah, well, that's a bit of an anomaly in Indian politics that when you take a progressive turn, there's still a complete absence of the left.
Yeah.
And since 2009, now interestingly, from between 2004 and 2009, the left went from its highest ever strength in parliament to its lowest ever strength. And it's just not been able to recover lost ground since then. And in most cases, it's kind of squeezed out between two powerful adversaries at the regional level. And in West Bengal, you had the BJP coming in a big way, and Mamata literally stealing the clothes of the left, and and the left just failing to win it back. In Kerala, of course, the left has always been at a disadvantage in national elections. In state elections, they do considerably better. So yeah, single digits does not seem a very promising place for the left to be in. But they can take solace from the fact that in 2004 they had a substantial presence, and they did kind of force the pace on such progressive legislation as the National Rural Employment Guarantee and the Right to Information Act, and later on, of course, the Right to Food Act and so on. So they can take solace from the fact that in some senses these progressive legislations have become part of the Congress program, right? The income support program, which caused a lot of controversy, of course, with all the unfounded rhetoric from the Prime Minister about Mangal Sutras being stolen and so on. So, it has become part of the common sense in some senses. So I guess when the ideas of a party become part of the common sense, the party itself fades out of the picture. That's probably what's happening right here. So it's going to be an uphill climb for them to regain ground wherever they've lost, wherever they were powerful at one time. Now, especially with West Bengal, the new configuration between Mamata, the new kind of bonhomie between Mamata and the Congress, it's going to be still more difficult for them. So what is positive, I guess, and I don't know how significant this is, people from the ground will have to really bear this out. But what I think has been a positive element is that they've tapped into a new generation of candidates, at least in West Bengal. They have had a lot of fresh young people emerging as candidates. They didn't do particularly well, but if they stay the course, maybe their turn will come, their opportunity will come at some point in the future.
Right. You want to add to this, Anand? Because it's an interesting point.
I'll be glad to have a chance to add to this.
Yeah.
The fundamental issue with the left is not to do with what it stands for. Although it has been accused of pursuing a foreign ideology in this country, and that was an old criticism going back decades. It's the Marx. By left, I mean the Marxists, those who believed in Marx and Lenin, Russian Revolution, and later the Chinese Revolution, and the theoretical foundations laid by Marx and Engels. I'm referring to those people especially. They formed parties which worked for a time. Today, I think those very people have completely lost touch with the ground. Rahul Gandhi went and hit the ground, and they have folded up from the ground.
Right.
Look at the case of Bihar, where one section of the left, the CPI-ML,
was very visible actually in the campaign
led by Dipankar.
Yeah.
They have been around for some time in a consistent fashion, and their support is rising, and sometimes it gets reflected in elections, at times not, and sometimes they need to come together with a local regional force, like in this case, RJD.
Yeah.
Look at Rajasthan. The CPIM did very well. One seat they have picked up. They were there on the ground.
Yeah.
In Rajasthan, which is otherwise pretty hostile territory.
Absolutely.
Old Samanti, old feudal, etc., where BJP has found a home of some kind. It's very strong. Congress fought back. But the left was not on the ground in that area in Rajasthan. It has always been there, that belt. So there it's worked. So the left, I think, has kept itself aloof from the people, from people's movements, not only in Northern India. It became a party wholly of governance while Jyoti Babu lasted. I know the government went on beyond Jyoti Babu to Buddhadev Dasgupta also. But they had lost touch. The left there was becoming a party somewhat of the vested interests. And
like one of them said, no, the party comes out of Sangharsh and protest and resistance.
Yes.
And when it starts ruling for 30, 40 years,
any party,
it loses touch.
So has the BJP. They have risen out of Sangharsh, out of struggle.
Yeah.
Nothing drops in anyone's lap. And it is noteworthy that entire Rath Yatra of the Congress leader, Rahul Gandhi.
Or Nyaya.
The left, Nyaya was the latter one. Yeah. Both. Let's take both.
Bharat Jodo Yatra. Don't say Rath Yatra because I thought you were talking
about... sorry. Did I say Rath Yatra? I meant the Bharat Jodo Yatra.
Yeah.
The left was conspicuous by its absence. People did raise questions. When the Yatra came to Delhi, I went there.
Yeah.
I found there were many young left-wing activists of different parties enthusiastically taking part. But leadership level they were missing. And the ideas of extending the tactics to support an organization which was not them, to which they were opposed in many places. But yet it is some kind of negativism, some kind of a sectarian approach that we shall be active participants only when we are the progenitors of an idea.
Yeah.
Now that thought, I think, has cramped the left. And I think if they are to progress, they need to change that. Point number two, I think, apart from don't forget, the very first government formed in the country, Nehru's government, it had picked up many ideas from the Karachi Congress resolution, 347, right? Important ideas.
Of course, the left was very important.
And the left did not, the Communist Party of India at that time did not see it that way. They gave a slogan. Ye aadmi jhoti hai was the slogan.
Yeah.
They did not realize.
Yes.
They did not realize that a struggle against colonial rule was very much part of what the left would itself like. You don't have to arrive at a socialist revolution in order for society to move in a positive direction.
Yeah, but the left, to be fair, changed course, right? And it sort of
course they changed course. They changed course when they got injured, when they got hurt, when they took a knock.
It happens, yeah.
No, I'm not saying, I'm saying that historically, if we are recording the perspective, then that's part of the perspective.
Of course, that's a very important part
left indeed,
of the left movement, or the lack of...
Well, indeed, in complicated states like Kerala and Bengal, where they held power, and they held power brilliantly, and they had brilliant leaders in both places, especially, I would say, Kerala. Where E.S. Namboodiripad was not only a political revolutionary, he was a social revolutionary also. A.K. Gopalan, they were social revolutionaries also. They took part in the temple entry movement because they were connecting with the poorest of the poor, the Dalits. That somehow, that perspective was not taken forward in many other places, except in a sporadic fashion.
Right. Sukumar, let's get down to probably the last part of this conversation, but for all of us and for you, a very important part about the media. This whole capitulation by the media, the sycophancy, the works. To what extent has it actually damaged democracy, given, and to what extent has it also strengthened democracy, which I would, or at least strengthened one part of democracy, which I would explain if you want me to later, but go ahead with it.
The media, of course, has had an inglorious career over the last 10 years. Yeah. And in fact, in the prelude to this election, we had the chief anchor of one of our news agencies that's grown enormously over the last 10 years for reasons that are not very hard to guess. This anchor asking a question of the Prime Minister. Now, for some reason, she has very privileged access. And she asks the Prime Minister, are these elections a mere formality? So, so there's no election anywhere in the world that's a formality. Every election has a very, very clear message, which everybody has to take home, right? And of course, the Prime Minister reveled in that kind of attention, and he basked in that kind of worshipful kind of media treatment. But the other side of the picture is that the vast number of YouTubers that have come into the picture who've been garnering audiences in the millions, right? And speaking in a language that is widely comprehensible. People who speak Hindi in best possible kind of Hindi, which everyone in the country can understand. You don't have to be a native Hindi speaker to understand what Ravish Kumar says, or what Dhruv Rathi has been saying, or Abhisar Sharma, or Arfa Khanum, and so on. So that's kind of had its impact. Obviously, the kind of audience that they have garnered over the last 3-4 months during the election campaign and afterwards has counted for something. And it's also, I think, emboldened some people to believe that there are possibilities outside what you hear kind of around the clock from the mainstream media. There are possibilities. There is another world. There's another way of looking at things. And that has certainly resulted in a significant change in voting behavior. So there is reason to hope that there is a new kind of media environment emerging. It's kind of going to work on different technical parameters. It's going to be more online and so on. It's going to be accessed through telephones, not through your daily broadsheet newspaper. It's going to be, it's going to be more pervasive in that sense. And the older hegemony that the Modi camp had over social media has probably been broken now, and not broken through organized kind of campaigns like the BJP IT cell has been running. Now, for instance, if you look recently at the bail order secured by Arvind Kejriwal from a Rouse Avenue court before the Delhi High Court stayed it, certain kind of parts of the judgment were just taken completely out of context and repeatedly retweeted and then sent out over WhatsApp to multiple groups. And these WhatsApp groups have a kind of tendency to proliferate, multiply the message, right? And the completely selective choice of one paragraph out of the whole order. And, that kind of a thing has been having its impact over the years. But now there's somebody opposing that, and that's made a significant difference. So there's certainly reason to be optimistic about how the media environment is going to shape up in the next 5 years. And of course, the other reason to hope is that the older media, the print media, is not really completely abdicated. They're still there. They're still there. They're still showing the flag. They're still carrying some semblance of commitment to free and fair reporting.
And particularly the regional English papers, more than the ones based in Delhi.
That's true. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Although they all suffer from this malaise of having the first 3 pages devoted to advertisements, which is a completely different kind of personality for broadsheets that enjoyed so much respect not more than 15, 20 years back, right?
Yeah. But this started a long time before also. It didn't really start with the BJP, to be fair. There's front.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Becoming
about 15, 20 years back. Yeah. I think 2008, the financial meltdown and so on. Got havoc with their bottom line fundamentals. Yeah.
So, what Sukumar said, Anand is right, of course, which is what I meant, that there is this other democratic surge of people on the alternative space. But would you, as a solid print journalist, which all of us were, hope to be still, feel that the casualty has been facts, and sometimes even the people who are questioning the government or take on, the YouTubers, as it were, play around a bit with the facts? So has that been a bit of a casualty in this whole process?
I didn't think so, Seema. I was a pretty active participant in discussions held by YouTube platforms in Hindi over the last, say, 4 or 6 months, which meant through the election period. If they were wrong on facts, sometimes they were, it was due to the fact that they didn't have easy access to those facts. But there was no...
Very seldom. Yeah.
There was no willful distortion.
Yeah.
I think that kind of slip up on facts happens with old established heritage media as well. Although they have a panoply of news gatherings, instruments. Even then, they also slip up, and they don't slip up intentionally. Unless sometimes on a very important ideological subject, their proprietor downward, their editor downward, they decide to give precedence, when you examine the hierarchy of causes, to a cause which is lower down, but you want to play it up. And the more significant ones get pushed down. And that can lead to some distortions. But this kind of thing does not happen every day. In fact, to be fair to the heritage media, in which I do not count our television, which is abysmal. Our Indian television, what's called mainstream television, is abysmal. They have neither facts right nor presentation right. They are just a pillaring ground for those they happen not to agree with, basically. And a complete worshipful loyalty to those they are trying to play up. That's one thing. Now, as far as the print media goes, since 47, consistently over time, we have seen their attention in trying to uphold the idea of civil liberties and political freedoms of the individuals, of society. That's one. Number two, their attention has seldom strayed towards the poorer sections of the people. It's been captivated more by those sections from which they draw advertising, and that's been the characteristic of that medium. But on the whole, on the reporting, they have been quite fair, and they, I think, continue to do so. as both of you said. And in the media also we have seen that. But unfortunately, we have not seen the perspective in the regional Hindi language media. I do not know about other languages than we have seen in the regional English language press.
Right.
We should
So,
take into account,
yeah.
and we should take into account the fact that in furthering the idea of the Indian constitution being put in hot waters by the regime of the time, the YouTube platform walas, they had a significant role to play.
Right.
Rather than the mainstream print medium or the television medium.
Right. I'll ask Sukumar to have the last word. And a question that arises is that why and how, we know, of course, it's the corporate and the big money going to the government and the government using it to control and wanting to control the television first and then the print. But even so, why is it that TV almost in its entirety fell to this onslaught from 2014 onwards, whereas there was still some resistance from the print media, whether it was states or even some at the center? There were ways that they were trying to get their news through. Is it because TV, when it came into existence in India, was flaky from the very beginning and didn't have that ethos of solid journalism? Or was it something else?
Well, it's a complex question, needs to be studied in depth. But one, of course, is that it's a new entity and does not come with any kind of
Anchorage.
Any kind of anchorage in all the practices and in any kind of a social political movement, right? Many of our print, the larger number of among our print publications did have some form of association with the freedom movement. They were compelled to take positions despite the very kind of strong element of conflict involved and the pressure of British, the repressive laws that the British introduced. They were often compelled to take positions and learned courage in some sense. Then, of course, the adversities and the various years of independence, they had to kind of take positions there. Now, if you look at the visual media, the TV media, they all they all start proliferating from about 2004-05 onwards. Now, it's a very buoyant time for the economy, and it seemed that the horizons were unlimited, infinite, that advertising expenditure would expand sufficiently to accommodate all of them. That obviously didn't work out the way they anticipated. From 2008 onwards, they've been struggling to keep their heads above water. And I think the imitative kind of logic plays its role, because if one channel proves that playing fast and loose with facts and adopting this kind of very strident, intolerant tone in broadcasting can get you eyeballs, then everybody is kind of, impelled to believe that that's the way, and we should all be kind of, following that example, which is why the tone and the style set by Arnab Goswami when he was Times Now anchor has now become virtually the standard practice in all news channels.
All of them. Yeah.
So that and even with all this, it's doubtful if any of them is really turning in a profit, because they all remain very, very opaque in terms of their accounting and so on. So I think we need to, on a separate note, it's a slightly different theme, but we need to introduce some laws of financial transparency for these entities. So that is, I think, the story here, and I think many of these channels, I don't mind saying it, are being rewarded through some forms of financial flows which are off the books, and that's how they survive. That's exactly how this whole thing is working out. So we need really to introduce those laws of transparency, because it's a matter of public interest, and they're using a public resource. They're using the radio frequency spectrum to broadcast this absolute tripe to the people. So there has to be some form of accountability. And also, you should also keep in mind that they have successfully sabotaged all the audience measurement programs, so that there's no basis for a fair allocation of advertising among the channels, right? So everybody's in this game. There's a race to the bottom, which still shows no signs of reaching that bottom. We're still going deeper and deeper into that abyss.
Right. Okay, thank you so much, both of you, for giving this time. Thanks a lot.